If you're a landlord, you know, and if you want to be a landlord, you will know soon, that one of the most important things in any rental property is going to be the tenant. Is finding a good tenant who's going to take care of your property, pay their rent on time, and if there's a problem, notify you in a timely fashion. We're looking for good people because good people translate into good investments. But finding those good tenants, even if if you've been doing this for a long time, you can sometimes slip up. Sometimes you end up putting somebody into a property that you probably shouldn't. It's part of the business. But minimizing those failures is really important. So I want to talk about how to screen your tenants to make sure that you're going to find the best quality tenants time after time after time. Now, first thing, what are we looking for? When I'm evaluating an application for a rental property, there are a couple bullet points or criteria that I'm looking at to do my evaluation. But the overall feel, the overall guiding principle that I'm looking for is that I want to rent to people that have something to lose. And you're saying, what are you talking about? Well, I'm looking for people that have credit. So that shows a good track record, but it's also something that if you've got a good credit score, it's something you're building over time. It's not something that happens overnight. And typically people are not willing to sacrifice that good credit because they get ticked off at the landlord or because they're not willing to jeopardize that good credit standing for something trivial. That's really our guiding principle as far as credit goes, but also when I say something to lose, I've rented to tenants that are just out of college. They're just getting started. Maybe it's a young couple, and their objective is to build a house and home. So they're looking down the line and they're saying, all right, they might not have great credit because they just got out of college and their credit history is limited. And their incomes might not be that great because they're just getting started in their careers. But if we compare that maybe now to a different candidate that they've been renting their whole life, their credit's terrible, their income might even be better than this young couple. But if I evict this candidate number two, it's going to have little impact on their life except to be removed from my property. So basically, as my guiding principle, I want to look for items on the background check, the credit score, the income verification, all these things, so that I can find that that's something. I'm looking for a candidate that has a good track record, but they have something to lose if something were to go wrong. All right. Here's how we're going to find this. Before you get started in screening any candidates for any particular property or overall, you're going to want to stop and sit down and write down a list of criteria. This may be, limited. For me, I'll say this. In certain areas where my properties are in majority tenant-occupied housing, I know that credit scores are going to be a little bit lower. I also know that income, we're not going to necessarily have people renting these properties that are making, $100,000 to $150,000 a year. I know that there's a certain ballpark that they should be in. Also, you're going to want to determine, will you accept Section 8 or, housing grants or things like that? Will you accept people with evictions? How about bankruptcies or foreclosures or other content that could be in their credit score? One thing that I've found and that I've talked to other landlords and property managers about is that people with defaults on their student loans. I've found that when people default on their student loan, it's an indicator for me, not so much on their or not even personality, but their track record or their character, but it's more indicative that I've found people that default on their student loans end up being a handful for me. I get more service calls, I get more complaints. So that's one of my criteria. If people default on their student loans, that excludes them from a rental. These might be things that you have from your own interactions, but you want to write these down because this is going to be your rubric. This is your starting point, and it also it protects you with fair housing laws so that you're not discriminating or showing any kind of discrimination against any particular group. So you start there, and it adds to the consistency of your screening process. Every applicant is compared against your perfect applicant. They're either approved or they're denied based on those numbers. Second thing that we're going to want to do is you got to market your properties. If you have 2 applicants to choose from, you might tend to push the limits of what's acceptable and unacceptable for an applicant. If you have 50 applicants, you're probably not going to bend. So it's important to get out there and get the property in front of the people that are looking. As part of your marketing efforts, these can be very low cost or even no cost options to get a ton of inquiries. I start on Craigslist. You want to include a Craigslist ad, which includes pictures of the property, neighborhood. I don't post the property address for security reasons, but you're going to say 3 bedrooms in such and such a neighborhood. List the amenities for the property. This is going to include who's paying for what utilities, if they're paying for the utilities, what they are. If it's gas heat or electric heat or forced air, whatever. List all the utilities, who's responsible for what, who's paying water, any additional charges that will be included on the lease. If you have a pet policy, you want to accept pets? Yes. Is there an additional fee? If so, how much? And general information about the property. You want to include any close by schools, any close by shopping centers or restaurants, things like that. Things that would be attractive to a prospective tenant. Then you can lay out your process. Once I get the application, an application fee is expected at $40 or $100, whatever you're choosing to charge. When you put that on Craigslist, you'll start getting calls and emails. Additionally, you probably want to post it a couple different places online as well. There's several free resources where you can go and post properties, pictures, and all that kind of information, and it'll generate interest. As the leads come in, you want to basically book everybody for an open house. Schedule 5, 6, 7 people at a time to come and look at it, because guess what? If you schedule 10 people, maybe 5 will show up at the showing. You don't want to schedule one-on-ones. There'll be a lot of fallout. But the bottom line is you want to get as many people through the property in as little time for you as possible so that you can get the most applicants and be able to screen the property. The third step on how to find these good tenants is that you got to be sure that you have a reserve. And this doesn't seem like it's related, but it really is. If you have reserves so that you can carry a property for a little bit longer, you're not going to feel forced to get that tenant or find a tenant before your next mortgage payment's due. So you want to make sure that you have cash reserves so that if you have to carry that an extra month or 2 months for the vacant property, you can do so comfortably without feeling pushed into a situation where you got to throw someone in the house. Now we come to the evaluation. You've got the applications in. Let's say you have 3 different applicants. There's a couple key points that you want to look at. In your application, my first criteria, number 1, is income. I require my applicants and my tenants to make a gross income of 3 times the monthly rent. What that means is if the rent is $1,000, I need to see gross income of $3,000 a month minimum. The reason I do this is so that I'm sure that they're going to have all their bills covered, they're going to be able to afford the rent and then have something left over. If their car breaks down or there's a death in the family that they have to contribute money to pay for a funeral, something like that, I don't want to be left holding the bag because they had some incidental issue in their life that popped up. So first criteria is income. Anybody that does not make gross income of 3 times the monthly rent is immediately excluded. Criteria number 2 is credit. Well, now I'm looking at the credit scores, or I'm looking at the credit reports for each applicant. There's 2 things that I want to consider. Number 1, what type of property am I renting? If this is more of a high-end area, the rents are ranging from $1,500 to $5,000 a month, credit is going to be a lot more important to me than it will in a lower income area. Because in the higher income area, if people are making enough money to afford that type of rental and they have bad credit, it usually is an indicator of some other problem in their life that you don't want to be associated with. However, on the lower end of the spectrum, where incomes are traditionally lower, we're looking more at content than score. We're going to look at the types of things that these tenants aren't paying. If they have a cell phone bill or a medical expense that is on their credit and that's what's pulling their score down, I'm not going to hold that against them nearly as much as if they've had a car repossession, or if they've got, some judgment, or if it looks like they've never paid a bill in their life. One key factor that I look for are unpaid utility bills or collections for utility accounts, because if they're not paying their electric bill or their gas bill, it's likely they're probably not going to be paying their rent either. The third thing on my evaluation is going to be their track record, and I equate this to character. When I say track record, I'm looking for, it kind of goes back to their credit report. I want to see why they're not paying, if there's things that are unpaid, and also I want to make sure that they have on-time rent payments. So that kind of both fall under that same umbrella. I'll require, as part of the application, contact information for their current landlord and their prior landlord. This is one trick I learned from an old timer years ago, that if you're calling up their current landlord, he's got an incentive. If he's having a bad experience with a tenant, he might just want to get him out of his property. So he'll say, oh yeah, they're great, they're wonderful, and they move into your house, and all of a sudden it's your problem now. Whereas if you've got a landlord 2 times ago that you're talking to, they're going to be a lot more open. They've got nothing to lose. They've got no emotional attachment or any kind of attachment to the situation. So they'll give you a more candid answer to what kind of a tenant they were. They called every time that a light bulb went out, or he never heard from them. They left the property in great shape, or they trashed it. They paid their rent on time, or every month he had to threaten to evict them. This is the kind of information that you want to get. This is their track record, and will give you a picture of their character. Also, if they've got issues, let's say they have an eviction. I ran into a woman one time, and she's been paying rent for the last 5 years on time every month. She had an eviction. And when I started prying into the situation and talked to her about it, she indicated, yes, she did have an eviction. She had open heart surgery and was in the hospital when the rent was due. The management company didn't know anything about it. They filed for eviction. It just so happened that she lived there 2 years after the eviction was filed, which means she paid up, and she continued to pay for the following 2 years. That is, that shows good character, that these things happen from time to time, but what's the reason behind it? So the last step here in my evaluation is my verification process. Just because somebody tells you something doesn't mean it's true. So you're going to accept but verify everything that you're telling you. If they say they make $3,000 a month, I want to see paychecks for $3,000 a month. I want to contact their immediate supervisor and make sure that this is not a temporary job, and also that they're not planning to be fired, or you want to make sure that that income is consistently coming in, month after month, so that they're not losing their job, and at the end of the day, you end up with a vacant property or a tenant that's not paying. On the credit, obviously you want verification. If they're saying that there was an issue or something that's not on their credit report, they're going to have to produce documents to show that. With the track record, if you're unable to reach their landlord, one trick that I use is I'll say, okay, I can't reach your landlord, or you're unwilling to give me that information. Produce for me 6 months of rent receipts showing on-time payment. If they can do that, that's a good verification that they are indeed making their payments every month. So this is basically the breakdown on how to screen a good tenant, how to make sure that you end up with good people paying on time, taking care of your property, and really making your long-term rental investment a success. So I wish you the best in your real estate investing, and we'll see you next time.